So allow me to turn off my camera so that we can focus on the presentation of the day. And I do hope you can all hear me. Great. So just a little bit of an introduction about who are the organizers of this webinar. That is Valerie Waswa and company advocates. And we are a future-facing legal consulting firm with a global outlook, providing strategic legal advisory around aspects to do with tech law, tech policy, and the intersection of law, technology, and social impact. So think about data protection, think about cybersecurity, GRC, which is governance, risk, and compliance, emerging technology, AI, ethics, and all of that good stuff, right? And basically, we work with individuals, we work with enterprises and communities who are navigating, everyday legal problems and legal needs, and also emerging regulatory challenges. As you know, the law is ever changing, and technology is also ever changing. So the purpose of this webinar today is going to focus on 3 key sessions, which is understanding privacy by design, embedding privacy into organizational systems, privacy by design in software and digital products. And that's gonna be it. And then I will open the floor for questions and comments and all of that. So what we ideally want to do from today's webinar is to help the participants learn or rather have an understanding of what privacy by design is and how they can be able to embed it into organizational systems, how they can embed it into digital products. So this target audience is very diverse. You could be a developer, you could be working in the risk department, you could be in the IT department, you could be in C-suite in decision making, because as you're going to see in the slides to come is that privacy by design is a governance issue. And basically, we're going to make it very practical because it's a very complex topic, but you're going to keep it very practical, of course, aligning it with the law and specifically, Kenyan data protection and data governance laws, and also just providing measures that can help you protect user data from the entire life cycle, from the workflow to the app launch and everything in between. So I hope you get something out of it. All right, let's get into it. Basically, the first session, as I said, is going to be about understanding privacy by design. And my assumption is that we all know what data privacy is, right? Or maybe in one sentence, let me just give a very brief overview of what data privacy is. This is basically putting in place steps and measures to ensure that personal data is protected, is in terms of from the collection to the storing to the processing of personal data. It is done in a way that protects it from breach, in a way that reduces over collection of data, only using or collecting data for the purpose it is meant for, only collecting the data that you need and not more than that, deleting and archiving data when you no longer need it, and also pseudonymizing personal data so that it can no longer be tied or linked to an individual. So I do believe that we all have that basic understanding of data privacy. Today's webinar is not going to go to what the law says about personal data, Article 31 and the Data Protection Act. Let's just get into it. So why does data privacy matter? And I know, and especially for private sector, this is, for the regulators, of course, that's an important thing. They want to protect trust and everything, but you could be there from the private sector and you're wondering, why does privacy matter to me? And I'll tell you, it really, really matters. And I'm going to just quickly give an overview in like 10 reasons as to why. But even before I get into it, I just like to say that data privacy matters because personal data directly affects people's dignity, safety, economic well-being. You're talking about things like someone's health status, someone's bank account information, the color of their iris, their blood group, from sensitive personal data to general personal data. It someone's dignity is embedded into their personal data, and so data privacy matters. And also it is tied to economic well-being as well. So we're talking about it from a human rights perspective. Another reason why privacy is important is because if it fails, the impact is going to be felt across the organization, from employees to customers to users, etc. In Kenya, for instance, we've seen how privacy risks arise from everyday systems, from HR databases, customer records, digital platforms, etc., etc. With that background, let me just get into some of the reasons. As you can see, there is a word cloud there. I hope you can see some of the words. Maybe you can put it in the chat what you're seeing. You can see trust. I can see trust, ethics, compliance, credibility, you know, very nice words, autonomy, protection. Let's get into it. So the first one is trust, and is that protecting personal data builds confidence among clients, among users, among partners. So that is why you need to have a privacy first approach in everything that you do as a business person, as an activist, as an organization, because your clients will have confidence in you. And speaking of confidence, I hope you got a notification from Google telling you that this meeting is being recorded, and so I hope that you do all consent to it. And also for privacy reasons, feel free to just turn off your camera unless maybe you have a question to ask, and also just mute your microphone so we don't hear any, we don't become privy to information we may not want to be in. So we're talking about building confidence with clients. If someone knows that, you know, let's give an example of, I like saying this maybe because I'm a woman. So let's say a menstrual tracking app, like whatever, I know you have different types in the market. I do not want to patronize a specific one, or a fitness app. You will have the confidence to log in your data into such apps if you know that your data is not going to be exposed, there's not going to be data breach. So that aspect of trust. Compliance. It's very important for you to be interested with data privacy because, for example, in Kenya, there are laws like the Data Protection Act, and you know, you don't want to get into trouble with the ODPC, and you don't want to, you know, start paying very hefty fines, you know, being involved in investigations, legal problems. I believe as business people, you want to focus on the profits and not beginning to just get into endless legal rumbles and being sued left, right, center because you did not embed privacy by design into your workflows. Security. When you embed data privacy practices, it strengthens the overall security of said personal data. And so this prevents theft, it prevents breaches, it prevents misuse of sensitive information. Reputation, again, this is tied to all these points are tied, as you will see. Because imagine if every day you're on the newspapers because you've been sued by a client, you've been sued by a third-party vendor or an independent contractor because they asked to unsubscribe from a mailing list, but you did not, or you used their photo for an ad and they asked you to put down the photo, you didn't. And so every day we are just seeing John Limited every day on the newspapers. You see, it goes to destroying your reputation as a brand, and after some time, people will not have confidence to use your product or to engage in your services. Accountability, it's really an accountability thing, you know, being able to take responsibility for data handling measures that individuals and teams are responsible for protecting personal information. So this is just basically, you know, in case of a data breach, then you inform the data subjects and the data users that there has been this breach. And so in that way, it brings that kind of accountability. And even when needed, you know, you notify if there's a data breach, you notify the ODPC. Again, these are things that are already in the Data Protection Act. It's actually a requirement, either within 24 hours or 72 hours, depending on the nature of the breach. Transparency, again, just being open with how data is collected in your organization, how the data is used, and not lying, you know, not lying. And the reason I'm saying that is because, you know, I'm sure most of you read these long, intentionally long data privacy policies on websites and everything. And they're saying this is what data is going to be, your data is going to be used for, or collected for, but sometimes a lot is hidden in between the long messages. But I mean, being very transparent and being honest about how data is collected, how it is used, how it is stored. Again, it fosters confidence in users, in partners, in, name it. And also it helps with regulatory compliance, because with transparency, sometimes regulators for Kenya, it is the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, will reach out, sometimes, and they want to see how are your workflows and so if you're saying that we are actually undertaking data privacy measures in our organization, then you need to also be able to openly have logs and documents and all that and workflows that show that, just in case the general public wants to, have access to that. Risk, I think that I've also mentioned with security, because you reduce risk, and a risk may be legal disputes, risk may be data theft, data breaches. Also, it's an ethical issue, don't you think? I think it's an ethical issue to just be able to properly use, collect, process, store personal data. Great, so much for that. Give me 1 minute. All right. So now that we have a brief understanding of why privacy matters, I would like us to talk about what is this concept, privacy by design. I don't know if some of you have heard of it. Maybe you can type in the chat, and there are no wrong answers. What is your understanding of privacy, by design? And I can see people are continuing to join us. Welcome, welcome, and also introducing themselves. That is great. So I will just, in the interest of time, keep moving, but feel free to put it in the chat. What is your understanding of the terminology privacy by design, or commonly known as PBD? So privacy by design, basically, this is about, think about it like an, okay, let me use this example, right? And I just recently learned about it when, when you're involved in like constructing houses and stuff like that. So something I learned, and I hope this analogy helps, is that when someone is setting out the foundation of a house, it doesn't matter what part of the country you are, whether it's Northern Kenya, or at least the much I know, at least in Kenya, is that they when you're setting up the foundation, there's something you usually put on the soil. It's called anti-termite. And basically what that does is that even 20, 30 years to come, the house is not going to be brought down by termites, because you put anti-termite into the cement and the sand and all of that. So think about privacy by design in that context, that from the very beginning, you're embedding it into your systems, into your processes, into your digital products, an app, a software, an API, it doesn't matter. From the very beginning, not as an afterthought, not as a, knee-jerk reaction, but from the very, very beginning, from the moment you go to BRS to register your company, to register your partnership, or you go to Kenya Copyright Board to patent your software, from that moment, or the moment you write your first code for your app, you're already thinking of privacy. In a nutshell, I would say that is what privacy by design is. So you're thinking about, how is this personal data going to be collected? How is it going to be used? How will it be stored, right? Which systems, which cloud systems, and what security protocols have been put in place to ensure that this data is not going to be exposed to cybersecurity incidences, and how is this data going to be protected before launch, right? So basically, it's just to prevent. They say again, prevention is better than cure, right? So think about it like a vaccination vis-a-vis a cure for a medicine. So it's just, and this may include limiting data collection, making privacy the default, and just making privacy being part of everyday decisions, being part of every technology design, and being part of organizational practices. So with that being said, allow me to move to the next concept, which is principles of privacy by design. This is a common global best practice framework that has been in place for more than 3 decades now. And the person who came up with this privacy was the, I think, head of Data Protection Authority in Canada at that time. And so in these principles of privacy by design, there are 7 main principles, and I would just like us to, go through it. So these are global best practices from the practice we've seen with our firm and engaging with other partners, is that it is used in North America, it is used in Europe region, it is used in Africa, it's used globally. And so it's like the standard. And so the first point is that privacy risks should be identified and addressed early. It's called proactive, not reactive. So think again about it from the concept of a knee-jerk reaction. So basically, systems, products, and processes should be designed in a way that it prevents any possible data protection breaches and etc. before they occur, rather than responding after there's a breach, after there's a complaint, you've been served with a complaint notice from ODPC, or when now ODPC reaches out and asks you, you've been slapped with an enforcement notice. No. This principle is saying that you need to be proactive and not reactive. The second principle is privacy as the default setting. And so basically what this principle says is that the protection of personal data it should just come automatically. It should be the default setting. This is me using a word to describe the word. So for example, the users, now let me use an example of, let's say you have developed a fintech app, right? A fintech Chama app, right? And so the users of this app shouldn't have to change their settings or take extra steps to secure the data from the get-go. The moment they install the app and they log in their credentials, privacy should be the default setting. So what does this mean? So for example, let's say you're a Chama app. Why would you need the app to have a requirement to have access to one's microphone? You get, that is data maximization. That is collecting data you do not need unless you can tell us what you need someone's microphone for. So I hope you guys are getting the drift. So the thing is that it should be the default. Someone need not say no or to go to change their settings for privacy, like from the moment they start using your product, they start using your service, or they start engaging with, whether it's a digital product or even a physical product, privacy should be the default setting. The third principle is privacy being embedded by design. And here I would like the developers in the room to just move their ears closer to the microphone. And so what does this mean? It means that as you're coming up with systems, as you're coming up with APIs, you're coming up with products, you're coding and all that, you're coming up with workflows, privacy should be inbuilt into these systems. I do not know much about coding. I cannot code to save my life, but I hope you get the point that from the moment you're beginning to develop a software, an app, and whatever it is that privacy should be embedded into that specific code. Design decisions should consider, and also this also includes even dare I say, when you're because I know most startups, especially like in Africa, when you're looking for investor capital and all of that, usually you have to come up with a budget. So this also means that even as you're coming up with the budget for your startup, right, you also have a budget allocation for privacy. So this is from a functionality perspective, from a cost perspective, because as I always say, if you don't budget for it, you don't care about it. So I can tell that an organization cares about privacy by how much budget they have for privacy, whether they have a full-time data protection officer, or they have a fractional data protection officer, or they have a data protection department, and we have different people from different departments coming together, and they invest in trainings, periodic trainings for this. So it's all that. Full functionality is the next principle. And so basically what this principle is saying, and I've had the fight, and if there are any DPOs in the room, you can agree with me, there is always the fight between like the IT department, the business development department, the finance department, and the compliance regulatory department. Because they feel like you guys are slowing us down. We just want to come up with this new system, and you're here telling us, take a deep breath, let's look at the consent mechanisms and all of that. But what this principle is saying is that these two concepts do not need to exist parallel to each other. They're not at loggerheads, rather they are one and the same thing, different sides of the same coin. So privacy can still exist and usability can still exist, and now together they can coexist. So system and products can protect data while still remaining effective. Imagine, trust you me, it's possible. Systems and products can still remain being user-friendly. We're not saying that we want you to have a 20-step consent checkbox such that it's impossible for someone to even use your product. No, these two things can coexist, and your product and service can still remain fit for purpose without any unnecessary trade-offs between data protection and performance. So functionality is not the trade-off here. Functionality is not what you lose for embedding privacy into your systems. No, not at all. The fifth principle is end-to-end security. And here now I want the cybersecurity guys to also just open their ears even wider. So what does this principle say? It says that, and this is something we believe in as a law firm, is that we cannot say we have data privacy if we do not have proper protection mechanisms, right? Again, cybersecurity and data protection is like two beans in a pod. These two things coexist. Cybersecurity exists to ensure that there's data privacy, and cybersecurity exists to ensure that there's data privacy, and vice versa. And so personal data should remain protected throughout the entire life cycle. So what are the protocols? What are the cybersecurity protocols that you have put in place to ensure that this personal data is protected? So this could be either secure collection, it could be in terms of storage, it could be in terms of how you share this data, whether internally or with third parties. It could be even deletion if you no longer need data, saved data. How do you delete this? And also what are the, and more so the technical safeguards and the organizational safeguards that an entity puts in place to prevent unauthorized access, to prevent loss, and to prevent misuse. Visibility and transparency is also another principle of PBD. And basically what this is saying is that these activities around how you process data, how you collect data, should not be a secret, It should be very clear. It should be very understandable. Someone looking from the outside in should be able to come and say that, oh, okay, by perusing your documents, I can say that Valerie Waswa and Company Advocates, for instance, are a privacy-first organization. So it should be clear, it should be understandable, it should be available for scrutiny. So I think I've already said this, how it's collected, how it is used, how it is stored, how it is shared. It should be documented, because it's irrelevant, if you have proper data privacy safeguards and systems, but there is nothing really to show for it. And you all know that, there are certain entities that are more, of course, all organizations handling personal data, whether you have one employee or you have 1,000 employees, you're expected to, adhere to data protection laws. But then there are certain organizations that have a higher threshold or higher compliance is expected from them, especially those that are handling sensitive personal identifiable information, PII, or they handle data of minors and all that. So what I'm saying is that, if you have data protection safeguards, but then there is nothing to show for it, and I'm not talking about just a data protection policy or a data privacy notice or a cookie policy that you ask ChatGPT to generate for you. You know, and it generates for you based on Canadian law or whatever, and you're processing data in Kenya. No, I'm talking about logs, user workflows, and all of that. This documentation should be in place, because sometimes, you know, as I said again, some organizations, so let's say financial institutions, educational institutions, etc. Sometimes you're expected to share this with regulators like ODPC. So you need to be able to have it, and have it now. Don't wait until you know, hell breaks loose before you now start scrambling everywhere, trying to see how to backdate your your workloads for 5 years ago, and it's, you know, things have even changed and all that. The last principle is respect for user privacy. This is a very important one, is that, you know, and it's having a rights-based approach to how you collect, process, store personal data. It should be from a rights-based approach. What does this mean? Think about things like right to dignity, right to privacy. Just think about such rights, right? And there are also many other rights of data subjects, like the right to have access to the data as and when they want to, the right to ask for deletion of said data, the right to correct said data, etc., etc. I don't want to go into the, you know, into that. I don't want to digress, but what I mean is that, you know, you need to have a rights-based approach when you talk about privacy. So systems and processes should prioritize rights and interests of individuals. And, you know, this includes clear communication structures. I'm sure you've seen, especially with many financial institutions like banks, in case there is, you know, a system, a downtime, or there's a possible data breach, they usually send you either a text message or an email. So it's just something like that. Just keep the communication clear, providing meaningful consent. Underlining the word meaningful consent. Meaningful consent. What does this mean? Let me use an example. And this annoys me so much. And I think some of you can relate. Whether you're a user, it doesn't matter, right? You're on a website and you're busy scrolling on this website, but then you cannot be able to access the contents of this website until you accept the cookie policy. And it's like it forces you, and it only says agree to said cookies. It does not ask you to reject. Or certain apps that require access to one's microphone, to one's camera, to one's contacts. And if you decline to said app accessing those functionalities that are tagged to one's personal data, then you cannot use the app. I mean, I understand, for example, if you're using a fitness app like Strava to run, then it goes without saying that, you know, you need to turn on your location so it can track your GPS. But then why would, for example, Strava need access to my contacts? So again, meaningful consent is, it should not be coerced, it should not be they should not be coercion, there should not be undue influence and all of that. Or if you have a mailing list, there's nowhere that someone can unsubscribe to the mailing list and so on and so forth. There should be meaningful consent as to how someone consents to them using your, you know, their data. It's their data anyway, and data is the new oil. So you need the said data. So why not create a situation where your users can feel confident to even share their personal data with you. So respect data subject rights according to data protection laws. Yeah. So now let's go to the second section, which is embedding data privacy into organizational systems. And, you know, in this point, at this juncture, I would just like to say this, that you know, data privacy by design does not only apply to software products or applications. I'm sure most of you or some of you used to think that way, right? That privacy by design, from the word design, is only meant for developers and DevOps engineers and AI engineers and all that. No, it could even be that your organization is not a tech institution. Its product is not a tech product. It could be that you're a club. You're literally a club. It could be that you run a school. Privacy by design also applies to organizations, and more so it applies to internal organizational systems. So this includes HR systems. How do you handle employee data? And even like, let's say if they are signing in to a physical office, things like, do you really need to put their CCTV camera, or do you need to put their there's this thing I've seen nowadays with modern offices where you have to put your fingerprint, your biometric is taken, so that they know Wanjiku came to work today. So HR systems, the entire, from recruitment to leave policies to the entire life cycle, when the employee is done, even beyond when the employee leaves said organization, customer databases, customer information. It could be their email address, it could be their phone numbers, it could be their location, it could be their health status if you're a healthcare facility. So just customer databases, depending on the nature of the business that you run or the service or product you're selling. Finance platforms, case management systems, etc. So embedding privacy into organizational systems means that you're designing workflows that control access to the personal data, designing workflows that limit data use. You're designing workflows that reduce unnecessary exposure. So under the Kenyan law, that is the Data Protection Act, there is no, again, I'd just like to say that there is no explicit law in Kenya or in the DPA that specifically says that you need to have privacy by design. But then the act in itself says that, organizations, or rather data controllers and data processors, have a mandate to demonstrate these controls. Yeah. And it gives that through the different, you need to put in place measures to ensure that data is collected, used, protected in a way that does not infringe on data subject rights. That being said, I would like us to go on the internal workflows very quickly. So the first one is assessment. So the first step, when you're just starting out with embedding PBD into your workflow, is you want to identify what data is being collected. Is it national ID? Is it passport details? Is it fingerprints? And then how sensitive? You want even to categorize this data, because according to the Data Protection Act, is that, there are different categories of personal data. There is just general personal data, there is sensitive personal data, there is personally identifiable information, there is sensitive personal identifiable information. So, you first of all identify what are those data, what is the data you're collecting, okay? And then what are the sensitivities, what are the privacy risks? And then and then now you want to come up with a cross-functional committee to oversee this compliance and privacy. So this means you want to make sure that there's someone in IT there's someone, and by IT that is cybersecurity. You want to make sure that there's someone from legal, marketing, it depends, because personal data is used by different departments. So once you have done your assessment, then the next thing you want to do is something we call data mapping. So you want to map all data sources, all storage locations. So what are the sources of this data? What are the different locations? What are the different flows? How does data flow in your organization? So it moves here, it moves then blah, 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 like that. How does it flow? Okay. You may even want to come up with that flow chart, right? And there are, of course, AI-powered tools that can help you with identifying risks across the different sectors. So whether it is on physical premises, whether it is on cloud, online, or edge systems, etc. Okay, so once you have assessed, you've done data mapping, the next thing you want to do is PIA, which is privacy impact assessment, commonly known as PIA. So what this is, that you're now evaluating what are the potential risks before you start implementing the processing of certain category or categories of personal data. So, and this also includes different types of data. It could be AI training data. So let's say if you're coming up with an AI product or system, it could be algorithms, it could be cross-border data transfers. So let's say the kind of work that you do, data moves from Kenya to Germany and back to Benin and all of that. So you want to do a privacy impact assessment to understand, you know, what are the potential risks that may come as a result of you collecting, processing this data. And so once you do that, again, you document the findings for accountability purposes and also for compliance purposes. And if you don't get anything out of today's webinar, I would just like to emphasize that document. If it's not in paper, forget about it. This will save you and the organization when hell breaks loose. Okay, so once you've done your assessment, you've done your mapping, you've done your PIA, the next thing you want to do now is the designing, right? So now you want to start now embedding privacy by default, all right? So you want to minimize data collection. So let's say if you're developing an app, you want to minimize data collection, or if you're an institution or you are an edtech platform, now you want to make sure now you change how data is collected so that you only collect data you need. You can also use privacy enhancing technologies, you know, and you can encode policy rules directly into system architecture, so things like privacy notices, and make it visible. Okay, so once now you have now started designing it into your workflows, into your system, into your app, the next thing now is implementation. It's just like when an architect, right? They design a house and then now they get someone to build the house. So once now you have come up with your plan, I want to call it a plan, that this is how Valerie Wasser & Company Advocates is going to handle personal data. Now, let's now get to the implementation. So this is now just, you know, now deploying it into your everyday activities. So, you know, things like access, zero trust access, identifying management for humans, management for machines, securing third-party integration. So let's say if you use third-party integrations into your systems, whether it's let's say you have a third-party app that you collect payment, or it could even just be a third-party vendor. So let me use it in an offline example. You're a school, but then you outsource bus services for for the children, right? So when they get into the bus, there's a way in which, and I think you guys have seen it, they can put a biometric into the bus, and then they can it goes into the system that Valerie or James was able to, you know, get into the bus in case something happens. So in that sense, now third party could be third-party vendors, or it could be third-party integrations for tech platforms and tech apps. And also you can have automated monitoring that it can be able to track, so that you don't need it. It's very complex. And you know, every second that someone processes data, it is impossible to track that, you know. And so this is where I say law and tech and many other systems, procurement, etc., you need to work together, as you will see in the slide to come, right? So then the IT people need to come and see how can they automate monitoring of privacy, and then data processing. So this is just ensuring that use of personal data aligns with the legal requirements and organizational policies. And I hope that I'm assuming now at this point now we're thinking of having both internal and external data privacy notices and policies and etc., among many other policies. And also just, you know, having clear responsibility assigned at each stage. Because again, if you're not assigning responsibility, if there is a data breach, who is accountable, you know? So as we are going through this process, it's very important to know, to say that this so-and-so Cecil is responsible for this. And then Lilith is responsible for ABCD. Monitoring. Again, I think I've already mentioned about this. You can automate monitoring. You can do regular auditing and access logs and monitor access logs. You can also integrate incident response in case there's an issue. How do you quickly solve it? Because time is of the essence when you're talking about privacy breaches. And also, again, automation, I think I've said about that. You can also automate compliance to track privacy performance. And lastly, a workflow that you need to do is archiving. So in case you've already collected, you've used, you've processed, you've stored data, you no longer use it. So it could be an employee that has left the organization. It could be a student, God forbid, that has passed on in your school. Or it could be someone has deleted, they have deleted their account on their app, on a certain app, let's say a fitness app. How now do you make sure that, said data is deleted or archived? So you need to do this in a safe manner, either delete it or archive it when that said data is no longer needed. Also, periodic reviews are needed to be conducted, and also drills, the way they are fire drills, you also need to do quote unquote cybersecurity drills just to verify that, okay, there's compliance and there's system resilience. Working together to protect data. I think I've already mentioned a lot about this. Why is it important to work together? It's a shared responsibility. Data protection is a shared responsibility. It's not the role of a lawyer. And we always have this debate. Is data protection a legal role? Is it a tech role? I say it is like water. It's neither here, it's neither there. It's really everyone's responsibility. So very quickly, because I see time is fast spent, the first thing is you want to assign clear roles. I think I mentioned this. So, and is it IT, legal, operations, management? Everyone should know their part in their piece of pie in the whole cake, all right? And then open communication. There should be frequent collaboration between teams who are managing data. There should be periodic updates. If you ask me, maybe weekly. If there are any challenges, those should be discussed. Processes should be aligned to ensure that privacy practices are consistent. So we don't want to see that privacy practices in finance department is super amazing, but then privacy practices in marketing is not okay. You want it to be consistent and also to reduce errors. Accountability frameworks are also needed. So this may look like having policies, having report and audit mechanisms. And basically the role of this is just to quickly identify mistakes and to reinforce good practices. Privacy first culture. And I always say this, awareness has to be promoted across the organization, whether or not someone is directly involved in handling data, personal data. Awareness has to be done to the entire organization. Trainings needs to be done. This includes budgeting for it, creating time for it, and all of that. And also just having daily privacy practices for all team members. So privacy should be embedded into the culture of an organization. It's a culture thing. So this minimizes human error, reinforces ethical decision making, and strengthens overall data protection across the organization. Oh, okay, that's a mouthful. Third-party privacy controls. This is where I was talking about, when you're engaging with third parties, how should you engage? The first thing is you need to conduct due diligence. You need to assess vendors before you're engaging them. You want to understand how now the analogy of a school and you've outsourced a company that provides bus services. How do they collect data? How do they still use personal data? You want to have strong due diligence because it could be you are compliant and you care about privacy, but they do not. But remember, data controller versus data processor. You are the data controller. So in case something happens, the data controller always is held to a higher threshold of compliance compared to a data processor, because a data processor acts in the instructions of a data controller. There needs to be ongoing oversight. So you need to constantly monitor vendor data practices throughout the relationship you have with them. You need to conduct regular reviews and audits and compliance checks to ensure that the vendors continue to meet privacy obligations and adapt to any changes. So it could be changes in the law, changes in operations. Contractual safeguards. You want to make sure that you have data sharing agreements, or you need to have data protection clauses into your contracts. You need to define roles, responsibility, security standards, breach notification timelines and data use limits to ensure that vendors meet legal and organizational privacy expectations. Control data sharing. You only need to share data that is necessary with third parties. You don't need to share all your personal data or all the personal data that you handle as an organization with them. Only the one that where the two intersect, okay? And then you want to apply access controls and clear purpose limitations to reduce exposure and also to minimize risk. So quickly, let's go to the last section, which is privacy by design in digital products. So we've talked about privacy by design in organizations, but then what does privacy in design looks like in digital products? So the first thing, so here we are talking about the developers. I always just use developers. I know there are many terms. I don't mean to minimize your roles, the tech guys in the room, please. You understand, right? I know that I know there's DevOps, there's cybersecurity analyst. So okay, you get the picture. So we want to make sure there's built-in protection from day one. Okay, the first thing is data minimization. When you're designing apps, you want to design it in a way that collects what is strictly necessary. I think I already said this. Privacy by default. I've said most of these things actually. Ensuring that, automatically there is privacy when someone is using your product or service. They don't need to go to change the settings. They should be simple and clear opt-out mechanisms. They should be simple configuration menus, clear user choices. Users should be able to have clear control and direct control over their data. So you want to make access to data, deletion to data, correction to data, and preferences easy to find and simple to. Don't hide it. There is nothing to hide. Remember when we said we want to build trust, you want to build confidence, you want to build credibility. Hakuna kitu ya kuficha, just make it very open, okay? That way you're building trust. Security by design, I think I've mentioned this actually already. So again, as I said, if there is no cybersecurity protocols and measures in place, then what are we even doing? All right, so we need to make sure that even in the cybersecurity protocols you have for your app, all right, it has a privacy first approach to it. So this could be maybe encryption, it could be access controls, it could be having secure APIs and regular security testing. Finally, privacy checks before launch. So you have this app, you've been working on it, it's on beta mode, or wait, there's a name they call it. Not beta mode, but like you have not, it's still on testing mode, right? So before you launch it, what are some of the quick privacy checks you need? The first one, you want to test data flows. You want to verify that all personal data collected flows only to authorized systems and that it follows the intended use. Again, use, minimization, all that. You want to do this so that you can be able to quickly identify possible leaks of a collection of data or unintended exposure. The second thing you want to do, you want to verify consent mechanisms. Remember what I said, consent should be meaningful, consent should not be coerced, consent should be voluntary. So you want to check that all the opt-in stroke opt-out flows work correctly and they are very simple, okay? You want to ensure it is explicit, it's granular, and etc. The third one is security validation. You want to conduct again, we'll need our cybersecurity experts to conduct penetration tests, vulnerability scans, and code reviews to confirm that there's encryption, there's authentication, and access controls work as they have been designed. Also, you want to make sure that you have proper user rights tools. So you want to ensure that users can easily exercise rights like access, deletion, portability. I'm sure you've seen certain apps where it says it has the option when you are deleting your app or even not, and your account, it gives you the option to download your data, okay? So you want to be able to make sure that said data can easily be, accessed, deleted, it's easily portable, etc. So test dashboard settings and in-app tools have to be in a way that it protects data subject rights. Finally, you want to make sure that your documentation ready. As I said, it is useless if it is not documented. It is useless if there are no security measures. Those two things, very important. So you need to have both internal and external documentation. This may be including and not limited to privacy notices, policy statements, audit logs, compliance reports, etc., etc. So you want to make sure that there's a transparency of these documents. Whoever wants to access them, they can do so, and also just for readiness. Okay, that has been quite a mouthful, hasn't it? I would just like to end it by saying that, as Valerie Wasswa and Company Advocates, this is data protection and privacy compliance is one of our key service offerings. And what we do is we work with organizations, we work with in collaboration, okay? It's an ongoing, it's not a one-off engagement, it's a relationship. And our role is basically just to help you manage your data responsible. We help to translate legal obligations, the data protection laws and regulations, the cybersecurity laws and regulations into clear and actionable practices for everyday use. So this could be identifying compliance gaps. It could be drafting these policies for you, just to ensure that we reflect real world operations and ensure that data protection is not a checkbox exercise, but it's a working system. We also provide trainings for organizations, whether it's your internal staff, etc., to help you better handle personal data in a way that is confidently, and also in a way that reduces breach risks, while also guiding the leadership of the organization through regulatory processes, like helping you register as a data handler or a data processor with ODPC, helping with conducting investigations, etc. So our what we want to do as a law firm is to build trust, to avoid penalties and to help you operate legally in a world that is increasingly data-driven. So like the most important thing is someone to invest in data, isn't it? Oil and gemstones and rare earth are no longer the oil. The new oil is now data. Thank you so much for your attention. We are here to support your vision with clarity. It doesn't matter whether you're a startup, whether you're an organization, you're a company, you're representing a government agency, we are here for you. That's our contact information. You can either email us at info@valeriewaswa.com, or that is our WhatsApp number, +254 707 059 485, or you can just check us out at www.valeriewaswa.com. So finally, this is the last, finally, the next steps, we are going to get a recording of this. It will be shared on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which is Valerie Wasswa Advocates. We will share with you on email as well. And we also would like to invite you to subscribe to our monthly newsletter. It's usually up every first Tuesday of the month. So feel free to scan the QR code to access. And our next webinar is going to be, our February webinar is going to be on 25th of February 2026. Asanteni sana.